Hey, welcome back, guys. We are reading the book Socks by Beverly Cleary. In our first two chapters, we have met Socks, and Socks is a cat that they bought for 50 cents from a little girl. He was spoiled rotten. I mean, he got whatever he wanted. There was nothing for him to have to worry about until they brought a bundle home. And that bundle was Charles Williams, their son. He wasn't so happy then. So Charles Williams took it to the lap he always sat on, all kinds of stuff. So Socks is not a happy cat right this moment. But let's see how that pans out for him. So we're on to chapter 3, Socks and the Formula. The arrival of Charles Williams upset the order of Socks' life. Meals were no longer served on time. Laps were always occupied. Lights were turned on in the night. The washing machine swished and the dryer hummed at odd hours. The house was filled with lint from the new diapers, which tickled his nose. The Bricker's friends, who once had admired Socks, now came to admire the baby. Tiffy, the little girl next door who loved babies, who also liked to pick up cats, usually around the middle, came to watch Charles Williams bath almost every morning. Socks spent a lot of time sneezing among the fluffs of dust under the bed in the front bedroom where Tiffy could not get at him. The one comfort in Socks' life was leftover formula, sometimes a few drops, sometimes an ounce or two, which was poured into the bowl after the baby was fed. Socks began to wait for the sound of Charles Williams smacking his bottle. That baby, his cries grew louder and his smacks grew greedier. His neck became strong enough to support his head. His eyes stopped crossing. He made the exciting discovery that his hands belonged to him, and he waved them happily. He kicked his feet and said, "Ugh, ugh, good." "He's a big boy." "Yes, he is," cried Mrs. Bricker in a voice that used to belong to her cat. Socks, on the other hand, grew lazy. Instead of chasing his ping-pong ball across the living room, down the hall and into the bedroom where Mr. Bricker would have to reach for it, he now patted it with a curved paw and let it roll off by itself. When the mailman brought Charles Williams another present, Socks examined the wrapping paper, but he no longer bothered to hide under it or play with the ribbon. One Sunday afternoon, Socks, comfortably full of warm formula, was dozing in a patch of sunshine on the living room carpet when another set of visitors arrived to see the baby. They were Charles Williams' uncle, Walter, and Aunt Cassie, and 8-year-old cousin, Mike, who was carrying a package wrapped in paper printed of blue rabbits. Socks remembered these people. Aunt Cassie's lap was narrow and hard. Uncle Walter's enjoyed rumpling a cat's fur, so that the cat had to lick and lick and lick to get himself in order. Mike teased. This afternoon, however, Socks felt too comfortable and drowsy to flee. The first thing Uncle Walter did upon entering the house was to take it off his hat, which he wore to cover his bald head, and shy it across the room so that it landed on Socks. "Hiya, Socks, old boy," said Uncle Walter. Then he added to Mr. Bricker, his brother-in-law, "I see you're still keeping that cat." Socks glared from under the brim of the hat, but he did not budge. Mrs. Bricker proudly carried Charles Williams into the living room to show him to her brother's family. She had dressed him in one of the many little suits that the mailman had brought, and his rosy feet were bare. Charles William took one look at Uncle Walter and screamed. Socks came out from under the hat with a start and retreated under a chair. He recognized fear when he heard it and accepted the scream as a warning of danger. If Charles Williams was in danger, so was he. Maybe Charles Williams was of some use after all. So there he is with the underneath the hat. Cat in the hat. Miss Bricker, who also recognized the cry of fear, she sat down on the couch and held Charles Williams close. "Did something frighten the baby?" she asked tenderly. "It's all right. Nothing's going to hurt the baby." Charles Williams hid his face in his mother's neck and sobbed. "Maybe a pin is sticking him," suggested Uncle Walter. Charles William, braver when his mother held him close, stole a look at the visitors and shrieked again, and shivering with sobs hid his face. Socks peered from under the chair. Everyone was seated, although the Brickers were concerned. No one appeared frightened. "Oh, it's just Walter's bald head," said Aunt Cassie matter-of-factly. "All babies are frightened the first time they see a bald head." "What am I supposed to do?" asked Uncle Walter. "Take off my head and carry it under my arms?" Aunt Cassie, not a woman for baby talk, took hold of Charles Walter's hand. Charles William's hand. "Charles William, you are a fine, healthy boy," she said, and turned to her son. "Mike, say hello to your new cousin." "Hi, Chucky," said Mike, who plainly thought babies boring. Visiting relatives was boring too, and a waste of good afternoon. He set the package on the couch as if he were glad to be rid of it and flopped back into the chair. Charles William took his face out of his mother's neck, looked at Uncle Walter, and howled again. "For goodness sake, Walter, put your hat on," said Aunt Cassie. "Nobody cares if you wear it in the house. You can't expect a baby to understand the whole world all at once." Uncle Walter picked up his hat from the carpet and did as he was told. Charles William's sobs ceased. With the danger, whatever it was, out of the way, Socks turned a wary eye on Mike, who was slumped in a chair staring at the ceiling. The boy looked harmless enough, but Socks did not trust him a minute. As he watched, his ears picked up the faint, threatening wail of another cat, the sort of wail that leads to fighting with fangs and claws. The wail grew louder. Where could the cat be? Socks looked anxiously around the room, half expecting to see the old black cat that sometimes prowled across the backyard. The sound was all the more frightening because Socks could not find the creature who was making it. "Mike, stop that noise," said Aunt Cassie. "You'll frighten Charles William, and stop slouching." The cat wail stopped, but Socks continued to keep an eye out for the enemy. He also watched Mike, who remained slumped in the chair, bored with the opening of the gift, bored with all the explanations over the brown corduroy bear that his mother had brought at a church bazaar. The small bear caught Socks' attention, and he did not find it boring at all. The bear was going to make a good sparring partner, and Socks could not wait to get at it. "All babies love soft bears, and I knew you had enough clothes by now," said Aunt Cassie, who was holding Charles Williams on her lap. Have you started him on egg yolk yet?" Socks looked longingly at the bear, which Miss Bricker was holding on her lap, as if she needed something to take the place of Charles Williams. "Say, Bill," said Uncle Walter to Mr. Bricker, "have you thought about buying the kid an encyclopedia? Now's a good time. The price goes up the first of the year." Mr. Bricker tried to swallow a yawn. He had given Charles Williams his bottle at 2 o'clock that morning, and getting the air bubble had taken him longer than usual. Mike was bored with the egg yolk discussion. He was bored of his father sitting here under his hat, trying to sell a set of encyclopedias. He stared thoughtfully at Socks, who was still watching the bear from under the chair, then looking innocently in another direction. Mike parted his lips and began to pant in short, quick pants like a dog. The pupils of Socks' golden green eyes grew large and black. A dog? In the house? Where? The enemy cat returned with a threatening wail. The dog panted. Socks was terrified. He was surrounded by invisible enemies. Wild-eyed, he darted from under the chair to the center of the rug. Panting harder, the invisible dog seemed to be coming closer. "Say, hasn't that cat put on a lot of weight?" asked Uncle Walter, who had been forced to admit that Charles William would not be ready to read for a few years, and by then the encyclopedias might be out of date. "You know," said Aunt Cassie, who was letting Charles Williams clutch her fingers, "overweight animals are subject to heart trouble, the same as overweight people." Her voice then shifted to a higher note. "Does the baby see the kitty? Look at the fat kitty." "You're right. He is gaining weight." Mrs. Bicker sounded surprised, as if she had not taken the time to look at her cat lately. Charles Williams, turning his head in the direction of the cat fight sound, looked worried. Socks decided to risk the run to the safety of the bedroom, but Uncle Walter reached out and caught him as he tried to go by. Socks struggled. Uncle Walter would not let him go. "Mike, I told you to stop that," said Aunt Cassie, and continued with her discussion of Socks' weight problem. "That cat probably should be put on a diet before it's too late. Our poor old lassie is much healthier now that we have her on a salt-free, low-cholesterol diet." "The dog gets chicken breast. We get hamburgers," said Uncle Walter, amusing himself by rumpling the cat's fur. "I buy chicken breast on sale and freeze them." Aunt Cassie had an answer for everything. Socks endured the rumpling the best he could, but the minute the big hand released him, he crouched close to the floor and glared in pure hatred at Uncle Walter. Then, looking anxiously from the right to the left and back again, he fled from the living room to the hideaway under the bed. There he remained among the dust fluffs, sneezing occasionally and trying to put his fur in order in a space so low that he could not sit up. Everything was wrong. He hated Uncle Walter and distrusted Mike. Aunt Cassie did not admire him. Worn out by the events of the afternoon, with his fur in disarray, Socks fell asleep. Things were sure to be better at supper time. Even though Socks slept, his radar ears told him what was going on. The visitors departed. Charles William took his bottle and with the ears relayed the second burp to Socks's brain, he came out from under the bed and, trailing dust from his whiskers, ran down the hall to the kitchen in time to meet Mr. Bricker with the formula bottle. "Sorry, Socks," said Mr. Brickers, unscrewing the cap. "Cassie is right. You're too fat." Socks looked up and meowed to tell his master how hungry he was and how much in need of comfort after a terrible afternoon. "Beat it," Mr. Brickers' words were rude, but his voice was kindly. "We can't have any fat cats around this house. We keep fit around here." Mrs. Bricker entered the kitchen to prepare supper. "I'm going to watch my diet too," she said, as her husband dumped Sock's share of the warm milk down the drain. "And I'm going to start exercising. I still can't zip all my slacks." She raised her arms and bent to touch her toes. Socks was outraged. What was the matter with these people? He was supposed to have formula now. He always had formula after Charles Williams. These people could not treat him this way. He placed his front paws on Mr. Bricker's leg and meowed to let his feelings be known. Sorry, Mr. Bricker had made up his mind to start Socks on a program of physical fitness. 1, 2, 1, 2, Mrs. Brickers continued, touching her toes. Socks unsheathed his claws the least bit and let them prick Mr. Bricker's legs. "Ouch, cut that out!" Mr. Bricker unhooked the claws and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Socks to sulk beside the refrigerator while Miss Bricker, out of breath from her exercise, prepared the evening meal. "All right, Socks," she finally said after she tripped over him twice and stepped on his tail. "I'll feed you now and get you out of the way." She laid 4 pieces of kidney instead of 8 on the dish in the laundry room. Socks gulped them down and looked up as if to say, "Where's the rest of my meal?" 4 pieces of meat would not get him out of the way when he was used to 8. "Silly cat," said Mrs. Bricker of affection. "You and I are going to lose weight." Socks sat down beside the refrigerator and gave his whiskers a quick swipe with his paw while he thought the problem over. When Charles Williams fussed in the back bedroom and Mrs. Bricker hurried off to attend to him, Socks saw his chance. He sprang to the counter, where he was disappointed to discover that the Brickers were having wieners for supper. Too hungry to be choosy, he sank his teeth into a link and thumped to the floor. "Socks!" shouted Mrs. Bricker, who heard the thump and knew its meaning. Socks ran in a guilty crouch through the laundry and down the hall to his refuge, under the bed. Mr. Brickers was after him with a broom. "We can't let you get away with that," he said on his hands and knees as he lifted the Indian bedspread and poked at his cat. "Come on out of there." Socks carried his prey to the furthest corner against the wall and growling, faced Mr. Bricker. This was his wiener, and he was willing to fight for it. Mr. Bricker pushed the broom at him, but Socks did not budge. He growled more fiercely, and his fur rose along his spine. Let his owners yell and poke. He was hungry, and he was going to have that wiener. The broom jabbed again. Socks dropped his wiener in the dust, and with every hair standing on end, he hissed. "Okay, Mr. Bricker laughed. "Okay, you win this time, but next time, look out." He rose to his knees and left Socks to his prey. Socks settled down and gnawed the wiener as fiercely as he had stalked and killed it. If his owners did not care enough about him to feed him properly, he would live by his wits. All right. So, we had some visitors that we don't like, Walter, Cassie, and Michael. But they said something that got the Brickers thinking. What did they say about our friend Socks? He's getting fat. And fat animals can have problems just like humans. And you don't want a fat cat, no matter how much people think they're cute. So the Brickers decide they're going to put him on a diet. What's the first thing they do on his diet? Yeah, they take away the formula. He's been drinking the formula after Charles Walters is done with it. That's the only reason he even likes the kid. And they took it away. They poured it down the drain. No one gave him any. So that made him mad. And then when they did feed him, they gave him 4 kidneys instead of 8. So, of course, when you go on a diet, you cut down your food, you still get hungry because you're used to eating more. So what did he do to fix that situation? He jumped on the counter and stole a hot dog, or as they call it in the book, a wiener. And he took off with it. Now, cats are known to are hunters, so they do seek prey, but he was not going to get rid of it. So he finally just got to eat the hot dog. And he says if they're going to feed him, he's just going to take care of it himself. Alrighty. So chapter 4. Mr. Bricker said, Chapter 4, The Evening the Sitter Came. Mr. Bricker sang while he changed Charles Williams' diaper. Feed the baby garlic so you will find him in the dark. A boy's best friend is his mother. There's a little wheel a-turning in my heart, sang Mrs. Bricker. As she folded diapers, life was easier for the young parents. Charles William, who now ate egg yolk, vegetables, and strained meat, could sleep through the night without a bottle at 2 o'clock in the morning. Socks, not so fortunate, still woke up at 2 o'clock expecting formula to be poured into his bowl. He felt cheated by the diet meals that his owner served him. After his small, nutritious breakfast, he was allowed to sit beside the refrigerator all day without an offer of a bite to eat. He waited for food to be left on the counter so he could steal it, but his owners were too smart for him. Socks was reduced to catching and eating moths. The Brickers were not only refused to give Socks all he wanted to eat, they insisted that he exercise. Mr. Bricker tied a wad of cellophane to the end of a string and dragged it across the carpet for Socks to chase. "Come on, cat," he said. "You still have some fat to work off." After a few turns around the room, Socks, breathing heavily, found laying down easier than playing. The empty feeling in his middle sharpened Socks' hunting instincts. He stalked Mrs. Bricker's furry bedroom slippers until he caught them and shut them away in a closet. Until she caught him and shut them away in the closet. He crouched, waggled his rump, and pounced on the brown corduroy bear when Charles Williams shoved it out of his crib. He carried it around in his mouth until Charles Williams set up such a howl that Mrs. Bricker rescued the bear and returned it to its owner. "Bad Socks," she scolded. "You leave Brown Bear alone." Socks gave her a cold look. Couldn't she see he was not bad? He was hungry. Late afternoons were the hardest for Socks, for then Miss Bricker sat on the couch holding Charles Williams, draped in a diaper, to catch spills and spoons cereal, strained meats, vegetables, and applesauce from custard cups into his messy mouth. "See the kitty," she said, as Socks watched hungrily. "See the fat kitty?" Fat Kitty did not care about cereal, vegetables, and applesauce. But he resented the baby getting that meat. However, he knew how to get even. He walked to the front door and meowed. Socks now had Mrs. Bricker at a disadvantage. Both her hands and her lap were occupied, but she did not know whether her cat merely wanted to go out or whether he needed to. Socks meowed a second time. "Oh, Socks," said Mrs. Bricker with a sigh, "do you have to?" Socks meowed a third time. And as he knew she would, Mrs. Bricker set the custard cup she was holding down on the coffee table, carried Charles Williams, who fussed at the interruption, across the room and opened the door. "Socks, we love you," she said, "but you are getting to be a nuisance. A big, fat nuisance." When Socks took his time walking through the door, she gave his tail a little push with her toe and shut the door behind him. Socks was determined to satisfy the empty feeling in his middle. He leaped the fence and meowed pitifully at the neighbor's black back door, because the back door was the closest to the refrigerator. When the elderly woman who lived there opened the door, Socks lifted his nose and breathed in the fragrance of stew simmering on the stove. Mrs. Bricker had not cooked anything that smelled this good since Charles Williams had arrived. "Now, Socks, you old fraud, don't you come banging around here." The neighbor was kind, but she meant what she said. "You can't tell me you haven't had anything to eat, because I know better." As she spoke, she tossed a handful of peanuts onto the grass for the blue jays that came swooping down from the television aerials. Socks hated jays, noisy, yammering birds that dived at him every chance they got. While the jays were busy picking up peanuts and storing them under the shingles of the Brickers' half-proof, Socks sneaked across his own yard to the house on the other side. Unfortunately, Tiffy opened the door to his meows, but Socks took a chance and rubbed against her leg. Charm was often helpful. "Mommy, Socks likes me," shrieked Tiffy. "Lucky you," answered her mom from another room. Socks tactfully led the way to the refrigerator. "Mommy, Socks is hungry," Tiffy called out. "Don't let that cat kid you," her mother called back. "Can I feed him?" "Sure, go ahead," said Tiffy's mother. Juices ran in Socks' mouth as Tiffy pulled open the white door, and she took out a plastic pitcher, poured something in a cup, and set it on the floor. "There you are, Socksy," she said tenderly. "Nice Hawaiian punch." One whiff was enough. Socks gave Tiffy a look of reproach. How could she disappoint him like this? Tiffy squatted beside him. "Try it, Socksy. You'll like it," she coaxed. "How do you know you won't like it if you don't try it?" Socks' answer was a long look at the refrigerator. Tiffy got the idea. This time she offered him leftovers, chocolate pudding, which he also disdained. Obviously, this household had nothing fit for a cat to eat. He walked to the back door and asked to go out. These people were not worth bothering with. Tiffy, eager to do something to please the cat, opened the door. "Bye, Soxy," she said in a voice sad with the disappointment. I should have written it different, shouldn't I? "Bye, Soxy," she said in a voice sad with disappointment. Socks walked out with his tail erect and quirked at the tip like a question mark. Where could Socks beg next? Cars and dogs made the territory in front of the house dangerous. The evil jays, having hidden their peanuts, now were finding them and wrapping them on the roof to crack them. The sight of the jolly black cat sunning himself on the back fence was discouraging. Socks slunk home, let himself in through an open window. As his paws hit the floor, there came a sound he had not heard since the arrival of Charles William. The sound of Miss Bricker tapping down the hall and her going out for the evening shoes. Instantly, he was alert for the answers to two important questions. Would he be fed before his owners left? And would he be shut inside or outside the house? Prowl! Socks half purred, half meowed as he rubbed against the leg of Mr. Bricker, who was sitting on the bed tying his shoes. Mr. Bricker responded by rubbing his cat's head roughly and affectionately, but he made no move in the direction of the refrigerator. Miss Bricker tapped down the hall into the bedroom of Charles Williams in her arm. Is our big boy going to miss his mommy and daddy? She asked. Prowl, begged Socks at his most charming. Prowl. Yes, said Mrs. Bricker. The kitty's talking to the baby. She was wrong. Socks was not talking to the baby. He never talked to the baby. Do you think Charles William will mind us going out? The young mother asked anxiously as Charles William grabbed a handful of her long hair. He's beginning to understand so many things. If he does mind, he'll have to get used to the idea, said Mr. Bricker. Mom said we were to spend the check she sent on a babysitter and an evening out. You need to get out once in a while, and the world is full of babies who have survived an evening with a sitter. Prowl. The cat needed attention too. All right, Socks, you old beggar, said Mr. Bricker. Let's feed you and get you out of the way. Socks' victory is small. 4 pieces of meat, and while he was gulping them, the doorbell rang. The sound always unsettled him, but curiosity forced him to investigate. Miss Bricker opened the front door to the plump elderly woman who was carrying a paper shopping bag and who introduced herself. I'm Miss Risley from the Sitter Service Agency. She entered and leaned her shopping bag against a chair with a loopy upholstery. Hello there, young man, she said to Charles Williams as she removed her coat, and without waiting to be asked, she hung it on the closet beside the front door. Socks sniffed at the shopping bag, which had tantalizing smells. He stood on his hind legs with his front paws against the chair and peered into the bag, but all he could see were some yarn and knitting needles. He dropped to all fours and sniffed again. Interesting. Well, hello, you old skeezick. All cats were skeezick to Mrs. Risley, who stooped to rub Socks behind the ears. Why, aren't you a big, handsome boy with a nice thick coat? Socks sat down and looked up at Mrs. Risley with love in his eyes. Here, at last, was a true admirer, his first since the baby had arrived. Charles William had his supper, said Mrs. Bricker, who had not trusted a stranger to feed her baby, but he will want a bottle when he goes down for the night. He's big enough to hold his own bottle now, and he doesn't need to be burped anymore. And what about Skeezix? Asked Mrs. Risley. What do I feed him? He's been fed, answered Mrs. Bricker, with her eyes on her son. And don't let him tell you he hasn't. He's quite a beggar, but for a while he was getting too fat. For your supper there is... Oh, don't worry about me, said Miss Risley. I always bring a meat patty with me. On these jobs, you never know what you're going to find to eat. Some places all you get is a can of soup or a waffle. She reached for Charles Williams, who looked surprised and uncertain. He turned to his mother for some explanation and whimpered. He's going to be all right, Mr. Bricker, firmly guiding his wife to the door. Charles Williams began to cry, and Socks stopped his investigation of the shopping bag. He looked anxiously at the 3 adults, wanting them to attend to the baby. Don't you worry about a thing, said Miss Risley. He'll stop crying as soon as you leave. They always do. Miss Risley was right. As soon as his parents disappeared, Charles Williams discovered the scarf below Mrs. Risley's double chin and stopped crying. He had never seen a scarf like hers before and found it interesting. Yeah, he said. That's better, said Miss Risley, and as Charles set Charles Williams in his playpen. She began to rummage in her shopping bag. "I'll call this my survival kit," she said to Socks, who was peering into the bag to see if she had something for him. From the jumble of knitting, crayons, scissors, color papers, magazines, and bedroom slippers, Miss Risley produced a roll of Scotch tape and, tearing off a piece, stuck it firmly to the big toe of Charles Williams' bare left foot. "There," she said. "That'll keep you busy." Once again, she was right. Charles Williams stared at his toe in astonishment. Never before has he experienced Scotch tape on his toe. He laid back and waved his foot. The tape struck fast and fascinating. "Ah, he said. Miss Risley was now able to devote her entire attention to Socks. This remarkable woman, who knew where to find things in a strange house, found Socks' brush in a laundry and went to work brushing him with long, hard strokes. Socks stood with his back braced and his chin raised, luxuriating in the tingle the brush brought to his skin. All the time Miss Risley brushed, she talked. "Poor Skeezix," she said tenderly. "With a baby in the house, it feels nobody loves him. Well, Miss Risley loves him." And with the tip of her finger, she rubbed his nose, where the hair grew short and flat. How good it felt. "Yes, he is a handsome boy," Socks agreed. When Miss Risley cooked and ate her meat patty, she served Socks a morsel. "Just enough so you won't feel left out," she explained. "We can't let such a handsome boy get fat, can we?" No, that wouldn't do it all. Somehow, Socks did not mind receiving only one small bite of meat. By this time, Charles Williams had exhausted the possibility of Scotch tape and was beginning to cross with it. He had pulled it from his toe and stuck it to his right hand, and then his left, back and forth, and finally succeeded in sticking it to the brown bear. He did not want Scotch tape stuck to Brown Bear. Charles Williams fussed, and Socks looked anxiously to Mrs. Risley. "Now, don't you worry," said Mrs. Risley, pausing to stroke Tabby's head. "I'll be right back." Socks was so relaxed the only moment seemed to go by for the time. Charles Williams was lifted from the playpen until he was smacking away at his bottle in the bedroom crib. Miss Risley pulled a magazine from her survival kit and plumped herself down on the couch where she patted her lap. "Now," she said to Socks, as if it was the moment he had been waiting for. This was the moment Socks had been waiting for, too. He leaped lightly into the sitter's lap, which was large, soft, and sweetly perfumed by this flower-scented soap. Miss Risley possessed the perfect lap, and a lap rarely experienced by a cat who lived in a world full of people determined to stay thin. Except for Socks' deep purr of contentment, the room was quiet. In Charles Williams' room, the smacking stopped, but this time Socks had no interest in leftover formula. He no longer had an empty feeling in his middle. The bottle fell out of the crib with a thump, and a silence that followed meant that Charles Williams had fallen asleep for the night. Socks began to knead the perfect lap with his paws, in and out, in and out. His purr deepened, and a dreamy look came into his golden eyes, in and out, in and out. With his eyes half closed, Socks felt as if he were with his mother, and the rest of the litter had been forgotten. Socks lost all interest in washing. He lay down in the perfect lap and wriggled until he was laying on his neck, his 4 feet in the air, his spine in the trowel between Mrs. Risley's plump thighs. Gently and rhythmically she stroked the silky fur on his trusting belly. "Poor Skeezix," whispered Miss Risley as she stroked Socks' glossy fur. "You were starved for a little love." She turned the pages of her magazines carefully so that they would not flick his whiskers, and the sound would not disturb him. Gradually the purrs petered out, and with final sighs, Socks fell into a deep sleep. The first perfect sleep he enjoyed since Charles Williams had been carried home from the hospital. Miss Risley loved him more than she loved his rival. All right. So in that chapter, that was the babysitter chapter. So we already talked about how he was on a diet and he was going crazy. But then someone showed up, and that was the babysitter. Because if you're going to leave your kid at home, you can't leave him by himself. How did he feel about the babysitter? He loved her. I mean, she loved him pretty much more than Charles Williams, he thinks. She took care of him, she brushed him, she petted him, she had a perfect lap. So both him and Charles Williams fell asleep, and that's kind of where we left off. So until the next video, I'll see you guys later.